Hello and welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I am your host, Natalie Brown, and thanks for joining me as we continue to look into the fields of sound therapy, sound healing, and using sound for health and wellness. Today's guest is Kenny Kolter. We talk about Kenny's musical and percussion background, his background in transcendental meditation, and how he got into providing sound sessions in clinical settings, such as mental health facilities, cancer treatment centers of America, hospice facilities, and even a federal prison. He shares some wonderful stories and inspirational experiences from working in those settings that he describes are why he does this work. He talks about his philosophy of playing from the heart. And we also discuss, during this unprecedented time of the coronavirus, how to use sound as a tool for self-soothing and self-care. This episode is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. The Om Shop is located in Sarasota, Florida. You can also find them online at theomshop.com. And they have a vast array of sound healing and vibrational medicine tools. So if you're ready to up your level of your sound healing practice, check out their website, consult them for guidance. You can shop online. And I've been so lucky to work with them in person and teach classes at their shop. And they truly offer a full holistic experience for practitioners and those seeking healing through natural means. So check out the Om Shop and Spa. Please enjoy this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast with Kenny Kolter. I think it would actually be really fun to kind of go back and talk about some of the pivotal moments for you as a youngster that kind of have evolved into what you do now. I know you were a percussionist early on and got involved into meditation early on. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm very fortunate that I grew up in a household that was very musical. My dad was a lover of jazz, and in particular Latin jazz, and I have a great memory of when we were kids. Let's say he would go buy the latest Cal Tjader album or something like that, and then he would invite anybody in the family to come sit in the living room and listen to the music, and we would talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
And although my dad he never played an instrument or anything, but he always just loved music, and it was a real, I don't know, like something that was soothing for him. It was a tonic, and so I thought it was great that we could, as a family, sit and, like, let's say my brother might go, "Oh, listen to that bass line," and we're kind of going, well, and how is that interacting with the melody or the rest of the rhythm section? And so that was cool. And then I have a sister that studied to become an opera singer, and as you know, that is a very long and rigorous course of study.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would hear her practicing her scales and, different arias and all that stuff. My brother played vibraphone. He was in the marching band in high school. And then I got a drum set, I think, he had a drum kit, then I had a drum kit. And then, I don't know, I always just was playing and just fascinated with the drum kit and playing along to records and stuff, which I still do to this day. That's kind of my therapy, is I go into my garage and drum along to all different kinds of stuff. And so I feel fortunate that music was encouraged and appreciated in my environment growing up, and as then I got older and playing drum kit and things, and then I learned how to meditate. I learned transcendental meditation when I was 12, and Honestly, as a kid, I'd be like, I'd rather go out with my friends and play baseball or, hang out in the neighborhood than meditate. But I did meditate, and I grew to appreciate it as I got older. And then after I graduated from high school, I didn't really have any big direction or at that time desire to go to college, and my brother ended up in Fairfield, and he was actually working on building. They have these two big meditation halls there, and so I was kind of just like not doing anything and aimless. And my brother said, "Well, hey, why don't you come out here to Fairfield, and you could work with me. We're building these domes." And I was like, "All right." I just kind of said yes and didn't really know what I was getting into, and it was one of the best decisions I think I ever made in my life, because then I did end up going to school there. I met some really amazing people from all over the world. It's called Maharishi International University, and literally I met kids and people from every part of the globe,
Mm-hmm.
and that was an education in and of itself. Just making new friends and learning about different cultures and religions and foods they eat, and so while I was in college, I was always in some kind of a band. I was in kind of a Latin jazz band and blues bands and rock bands, and there would be people jamming at different places every Friday night, and so I just, as a young adult, I just knew that music and sound and everything, it was just in my blood. It was kind of like part of my internal language and internal landscape. I was in a band, and the bass player was originally from Australia, from Adelaide. And after I graduated, we got this idea to go to Australia and have an adventure. And so we picked up where we left off and did some recording there and played a bunch of pubs and clubs, and it was fantastic. And actually, one of the tunes that we recorded was picked up by the largest radio station in the South Pacific, and so that was kind of cool to hear our song on the radio, and then life moved forward, and I got married and had kids, but always just kind of played as a hobby. But in my mind and in my heart, I was always wishing that I could somehow do music, and I know that the life of a musician is kind of crazy. It's weird hours. You're up till the middle of the night, and at that time everybody's smoking in bars and all that,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really want to kind of be in that environment. But then maybe, and this is going on like 14 years ago, I went and saw a woman play a gong in a meditative environment. My wife and I went, and it was just incredible. And I had played gongs, because I was played different kinds of percussion and stuff. But I was like, wow, I didn't know these instruments could have that amount of you know, varying sounds and frequencies and harmonics and subharmonics and all these things happening. And it just really blew my mind. And on my way home from that event, I said to my wife, I go, man, someday I'd like to do that, like without even having any, thought. It was just kind of came out of my mouth. And then the company that I was working for lost the big contract that they had in the Chicago area,
Mm.
and all of a sudden, I was out of a job and I was on unemployment. And my wife said, "Well, you've had this desire to, play the gong and do that. Why don't you try it and give it a
Mm-hmm.
go?" 'Cause I had purchased a gong off of Craigslist, and so that's what I did. And I was very fortunate that shortly after that, a woman, and I had played just like a few places, and I had done a recording, and then a woman called me and said, hey, I teach yoga at the Elgin Mental Health Center, which is the state of Illinois' largest mental health facility. And she said, we're having this sort of like open house wellness day, and would you be interested to come, and play the gong? And I said, yeah, great. so I went there, and I had no idea what I was getting into.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never been to a mental health facility like that, and I had these visions of, one flew over the cuckoo's nest,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And so I went there, and these guards, kind of escorted me in, and they had to search all of my gear. And so I go and set up. It's in a gymnasium, and I played for people. And when the session was over, you could just hear a pin drop. It was unbelievable. And then I said, "Oh, well, does anybody have any questions or anything to share?" And 25 people raised their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And patients were asking questions. Some of the social workers were asking questions and everything. And it was just so well received. And I was just blown away. I was like, "Wow." And so I didn't really think much of it other than I felt like, wow, well, that was, a cool experience and stuff. And then a couple days later, I got a phone call out of the blue from a gentleman who was the controller from the facility. And he said, "Hi, my name's Brian. And, do you have a few minutes to talk?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, the president of our, of the mental health center was wondering if you would be interested in coming and doing weekly events here for our patients."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, without any hesitation or thinking about it, I said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and then he said, "Well, there's two ways we could go about this. We could generate a contract here from our offices locally that would be for like a smaller amount, or we could go through through Springfield and get you a larger contract. What do you think?" And I said, "Brian," I go, "I don't know. What do you think we should do?" And I'll never forget this. He said, "This is what this guy told me over the phone." He goes, "Let's go for the big one." And I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
And so he said, "Do you have a few minutes? I can interview you right now. I'll fill out all the paperwork. I'll send it to you. You sign it, and then you send it, down to the government house in Springfield." And that's what I did. And I don't know, 2, 3 weeks later, I get this big packet saying that I've been accepted and sign here, and this is your day of your orientation. And so really it was an act of God or source or whatever you want to call that, that all of a sudden I had a contract with the state of Illinois that they were paying me very good money to come and play the gong and bowls and stuff for patients in their forensics treatment program. And so I used to go there every Tuesday, and I would do 4 or 5 sessions, either in that gymnasium that I mentioned earlier, or I would go to the various units where they kind of had like a common area and set up and play. And at any given session, there'd be 20 or 30 patients just, coming and either laying down or sitting comfortably. And so that was really an incredible experience. And because of that, then the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, which is in the Chicago area, they contacted me and said, "Would you like to come and do regular sessions for our, patients and staff?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And so then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I had two really wonderful clinical opportunities that I was working, and then my career as far as working with sound really grew from that.
Mm-hmm.
And having that like a contract with the state and stuff like that, it really opened up doors for me in the yoga world and in the wellness world, because I would just truthfully say, "Hey, state of Illinois is paying me to come and do this every Tuesday at the mental health center in
Mm-hmm.
Elgin." And so it was really just incredible. And the thing that I say to people to this day, that it's like I didn't know life could be like this, where I'm doing something that I love to do, that I feel very passionate about, and feel that, like I said earlier, that this is just kind of part of the 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 inner world of who I am, that I can share that with people and make a living at it, is really amazing.
And I'm sure that was very developmental for you too, to kind of, even after just the wellness session, introducing at the mental health facility and then jumping in and really getting a weekly experience. I'm sure it was very developmental for how you approach what you do as well. Just
Oh
having,
yeah, oh yeah, completely.
mm-hmm.
That experience. both being at Cancer Treatment Centers of America and the Elgin Mental Health Center really informed my playing and developed, kind of, and I think the style that I feel that I have is very shamanic in nature, and I have realized over time, and talking with other gong players and Tibetan bowl players and researching it, that the essence of being a sound therapist, working, or a sound practitioner, working with sound as a vehicle for wellness and transformation of consciousness, it all relates back to shamanism, where shamans would use rattles or drums. Uh, in South America, some shamans, used little chimes and things that these sounds were a vehicle for quieting the mind. And it's one of the things that I love about this work is that I get people, coming, uh, whether it's to a church or a wellness center or a yoga studio, where they're like, well, I'm not a meditator and I have a really hard time quieting my mind. And I just tell people, like, well, if you just have an open heart and an open mind, come and check this out and just lay down, let the sounds kind of carry you where they will. And oftentimes it's those people that are the biggest skeptics that become some of, the biggest believers in sound, because you don't have to do anything. You just come and you get comfortable and you let the sound wash over you and wash through you, and it really helps the mind to relax. And when the mind relaxes, great things happen. The body follows. So heart rate goes down, breath rate goes down, rapid eye movement goes down, and people come and have deep kind of transcendental experiences, and it's just based simply on the how do I say it, like the sometimes I say, like, the sound of the gongs is so thick, and it really is pervasive, and it's hard to escape. And people say that they feel that the sounds, these different sounds, kind of almost help people to cease thought, and that's the whole goal of meditation, is to quiet the mind. And you've heard this, that in the East they call that, the monkey mind,
Mm-hmm.
that, and we all have it, that we're all thinking, we have a billion thoughts happening in 1 second, and we're thinking about what we're going to have for lunch tomorrow and what's going on at work, and we're still rehashing an argument that we had with someone from 2 years ago, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that is natural brain activity. But if we can turn that off and quiet the mind, that's when our innate creativity and intelligence, and also the body's ability to, through deep rest, that's when the body can rejuvenate, and so people really benefit from it.
Mm. Yeah, let's go into a little bit more detail about kind of the environments that you were in a clinical setting, and maybe some, if you're able to share any stories about the mental health facility or cancer treatment centers, how they were unique from each other, or how you kind of saw people react or have benefits from what you were doing.
Sure, that's a great question.
Mm.
The When I was at the mental health center, the uh, other than, like, at first getting over the fact that I played specifically on unit, this area, it was called, the forensics treatment program. So these were all people who had some form of mental illness coupled with some kind of criminal activity.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So in this facility, there were people that had committed some really horrible crimes. There were other people that were in there that had committed crimes of a lesser nature, but still, these were criminals. And when I did the orientation, there was a really great gentleman who'd worked there for 20 years, And through the orientation process, at one point, I go, man, you're doing a really great job of just scaring the crap out of me because, and he said, well, that's part of my job because you need to know why you're here.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know in your heart and in your soul what you're doing here and be very clear on that because there are people in here who will take advantage of you. They'll, and during a moment of weakness or something that they will pounce on a situation and aggravate it because that is part of the criminal mind.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow. So at first, I felt that I was very much on guard and really, trying to carry myself in a very kind of, bold way. And then the next thing I realized was that so many of these patients were on just a tremendous amount of drugs,
Right.
of psychotropic drugs to keep everybody under control and stuff. And I almost felt like as a sound practitioner that it was, and I know this probably sounds very esoteric, that it was almost like I had to play through that pharmacological haze
Mm-hmm.
because these just weren't like people at a yoga studio that were like, hey, I'm here and I'm pretty healthy and I'm doing my thing and
Right.
I'm here to have a cool meditative experience. These are folks that were isolated from their families and their communities. They're, incarcerated. They have a very regimented life and it, and a, not an easy life, being in there. And so I think it took a while, like 3 months or something, for the patients and the staff to sort of get a feel for the work that I was doing and get a feel for who I was as a person. And then when there was some level of like acceptance and harmony with that, I became more comfortable, the patients and the staff became more comfortable, and then it was easier and there was more of a flow to it. And um, and through that process, I think I gained a lot of confidence in my playing because I received, I'm very fortunate that I received, wonderful feedback and praise from people in attendance. And then at one point, one of the supervisors came up to me and said, "Well, of all the activities that we have here at the center, yours are the most well attended."
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, wow, that really touched my heart because everything there was voluntary. It's not like they go, okay, it's 4 o'clock and
Mm-hmm.
we're all going to go play volleyball. There was nothing like that. It was, hey, these are the activities and people could participate in everything or they could participate in nothing and just stay in their room and stare at the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really rewarding that those sessions were well attended. And then probably the one of the greatest compliments that I ever had is that on one of the units there was a young man who was deaf, and he would come to all of my sessions and he would pull a chair up, close to the gong
Mm-hmm.
and just stick his hands out because if you're playing a 30-inch gong and even at a medium volume you can feel the vibration
Mm-hmm.
from the instrument. It almost feels like electricity.
Yeah.
And so this young man would just sit, he would hold the palms of his hands out and he would just kind of absorb the sound through his hands. And that was really beautiful. And then several months later, we had another kind of an open house wellness day, and they asked me, another thing that I do is I facilitate drum circles. And they asked me, they said, hey, would you come and do a drum circle? And I was like, yeah, of course, so I did that. And so this young man who was deaf participated in the drum circle, and he couldn't hear anything. And one of the therapists came up to me and said, Kenny, I don't know, how you do it or what you're doing, but you're probably the only person I know that could get a deaf person to participate in a drum circle,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know. and that was really, touching and rewarding. And then playing at the cancer facility, it was a completely different environment. I have to say that at that time, because Cancer Treatment Centers of America, it's in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and it's a full blown hospital with I don't know how many beds, but it's a full blown hospital, and that environment was so positive and cheerful. And I used to make a joke every time you'd ride the elevator there, you'd make a new friend because everybody was just like, "Hey, how are you?" And I'd be coming in with all my gear, and people would be asking me all these questions, and it was such an upbeat and loving and positive environment. I really have to, give my hats off to the staff there because it was, really a place of healing on that level, of just like you would walk in and there was just this energy that was like, whoa, and here are people that are getting diagnosed with all different kinds of cancer and life-threatening stuff, and they just did a tremendous job with that. And so the sessions there, the attendance was just really all over the place. Sometimes I would do a session and there'd be two people there. Other times I'd do a session and there'd be 20. And the reason for that is everyone there is like, hey, at 3 o'clock I'm going to get a Reiki treatment, or at 3:30 then I'm seeing a nutritionist, and then I'm having my chemo, and then I'm meeting with the doctor, and it's like people were very scheduled, and so it was kind of hit or miss as far as how many people were there. And the two stories that stick in my mind from that is another one that was related to a drum circle. Is that I was doing a drum circle, and people were kind of coming in, and I remember that there was like several, like a mother and a daughter, and or a father and son and all this stuff, and I'm welcoming everybody, and we're kind of getting all settled in. Well, this older gentleman comes in with a hospital gown on. He's got his chemo bag on one of those portable rollers, and so he comes in with his chemo bag and his hospital gown. His butt's kind of hanging out the back of it,
Mm-hmm.
and he just said, and we already just kind of started drumming, and he came in and he was like, man, he goes, I was hearing this drumming and I just had to come here and be a part of it. And I know I can't use my left arm, but do you have a shaker or something I could shake, or a
Mm-hmm.
cowbell or something I can bang on with my right hand? And this guy, and he looked terrible. He did not look at all well,
Yeah.
but he just wanted to be a part of the circle, and stayed the entire time, and just was shaking a shaker and just having the best time, and just feeling the energy of the music, and the energy of the group, and I don't know why, I'll just always have this memory of this guy coming in with his chemo bag to be a part of it. And then another really beautiful anecdote to share is I was doing a gong and Tibetan bowl session, and it was a woman and her father, and her father evidently had some kind of very advanced form of cancer and stuff, and so they came in to the session, and I used to do half an hour sessions there because again people were so scheduled out, and there's no way that folks could take an hour out of their day. So I played, did the first session for half an hour, and then this, daughter and father, she said, well, hey, that was really great, thank you, but we have to go to this other session. And the dad said, no, he said, I'd really like to stay here.
Mm.
And she said, are you sure, Dad? We're supposed to go see so and so at 4 o'clock or whatever it was. And he said, no. He goes, I really want to stay. I feel like this is really soothing. So they stayed for the next session. I played, and then afterwards, this gentleman came up to me, shook my hand, and said, thank you, sir, so much. He goes, now I know what the kingdom of heaven sounds like.
Wow. Mm.
And I, started to tear up,
Mm.
and the daughter started to tear up, and it's like I don't think I've ever received a greater compliment in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that by simply by playing a gong and some Tibetan bowls and maybe a rattle or a chime that I had at the time, that someone to have that sort of wonderful expression, and that's something that I've always kind of kept in my back pocket, because like, let's say I'm having a bad day, or I go play at a yoga studio and the yoga studio owner is you know uh not paying me my
Mm-hmm.
money that they agreed to, or something,
Sure.
that I always have that experience to fall back on, to go, wow, this is why I do this work,
Yeah.
is because of experiences like that.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, and I just had another experience.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear that one
Yeah,
too, and then
please.
we can move on? So I'm at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and they had this area that was sort of like this big atrium sort of place, where they had a bunch of big chairs and sofas and a fountain, and it was a place for people to just go kind of hang out and chill and read or visit or something. And so I used to do sessions in this part of the hospital, and then they also would clear out some things, and people, they would lay some yoga mats down, and so people could lay like right in front of where I was set up. So so it's a kind of typical session I'm doing there, and I'm starting to play and do my thing, and I notice out of the corner of my eye that a woman came in kind of late, and she came and she sat down in one of these big comfortable chairs. And so I'm just playing, and whatever, 10 minutes later, I look over at my friend Cynthia, who's a nurse there, and kind of a person that helped me coordinate my activities. She is looking at me, and she's just got this huge smile on her face, and she puts her hands together in prayer position, and she points to this woman in this big comfy chair, who is just absolutely conked out, like with her head cocked back, just resting peacefully, and just super relaxed and chilled and everything like that. And I play for another 10 more minutes, and I look back over at Cynthia, and again, Cynthia is just, who's a very animated person. She's just beaming, and she's pointing at this woman in the chair, and I have no idea what all this is about, other than I'm thinking, oh, well, this person's, relaxed and having a good experience and all this stuff. So the session ends, and at the end, I always say, oh, does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to share? And at this particular session, there were people with lots of questions, and I had some Tibetan bowls for sale. And so people were asking me about the bowls, and I was saying, here, play the bowls and have
Mm-hmm.
fun, and making it interactive. And so this woman who was sitting in the chair comes up to me, and Cynthia is right next to me. So she comes up to me, and she goes, "Are you a hugger?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." She goes, "Can I give you a hug?" And so I give this woman a hug, and the minute her head hits my shoulder, she just starts sobbing,
Mm.
just uncontrollably, just crying, like just this huge release. And so I just hold her, and she's kind of, in my shoulder, going, "Oh, thank you." And I was like, "Hey, thank you for being here, and this is my pleasure to be here and to play for everyone." And so then she kind of pulls herself away, and she wipes, like, I think probably Cynthia gave her some tissues, and she wipes away the tears and stuff, and she said, "Sir, I just really want to thank you for doing this work." And I said, and again I said, "No, it's my pleasure." I said, "I love being here." And she says, "No, no, no, you don't understand. You have just given me the gift of dreams."
Mm.
And I didn't know what to say,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "I have not slept, literally I have not slept in 6 months, and I thought I was going to go crazy. My husband was diagnosed with some, stage 4 very aggressive form of cancer." And she says, "My life has just been turned upside down. My children's life is turned upside down." She goes, "All I've been doing is worrying, and I haven't slept." And she goes, "This is the first time I dreamt in 6 months."
Mm. Wow.
And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, wow, it's like I just kind of take it for granted that everybody dreams, and sometimes you have funny dreams, and sometimes you have weird dreams, or you may have a sexy dream, or I mean, just whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's part of our daily rhythms of life, sleep, rest, and all that stuff. And so that's another story that all these years has stayed with me. And again, that's why I do this work, is because it affects people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that it's not about me and about like, oh, I'm so terribly talented or gifted or anything. It's just there's something about these instruments that if you approach it with, I think a certain amount of delicacy and musicality, it can really affect people in profound ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if it's just to simply rest or go within, I think
Yes,
what's so
exactly.
rewarding about it is the feedback that you receive because it is so different for each person, how it affects them. And yeah, thank you
Yes.
for sharing those stories. Yeah.
Oh, sure. And too, the other thing I love about this work is that it's different all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I know that there are some people who approach, working with sound that they have kind of a metered presentation that is kind of calculated.
Sure.
That they work it out where they're like, well, I'm going to play the bowls for approximately 5 minutes, and then I'm going to play the gong, and then I'm going to play the chimes and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I have some students that is like that's their comfort level. That it's like they have to have an outline of what they're going to do. When I play, it's just like I always tell people, like when I sit down to play, I feel like I just opened up a new box of crayons and I'm going for it. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and that sometimes I might play very very delicately for an hour. Other times it's intense, and other times it's a mixture of all those things. And so it's one of the aspects of this work is that I love is that it is different for me as a player and a person who is growing and learning my craft, but then also it's always different for the participants. And so, I always kind of try to mix up what I bring to a session so that I don't have the exact same setup, and I'll bring different bowls. I'll play different rattles. Sometimes I'll play chimes, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I tone along with the gongs, sometimes I, don't. So it's different all the time, and it just keeps it fresh for me. I'm repeating myself, but it keeps it fresh, and it keeps it fresh for folks who I'm very fortunate that are coming to 20 or 30 sessions over the course of the years.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that's a really good point, and all the different workshops and trainings and ways you can learn to play these instruments. It's great to learn protocols and techniques, but at some point you do kind of have to let go and just allow yourself to be guided by the energies and the sounds themselves.
yes,
So
yeah.
there's
Well,
that balance.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was really fortunate that a guest that you've had on your show,
Mm,
Michael Bettine,
sure.
he was my mentor when I
Okay.
first started to play. Because I lived in the Chicago area and he lives in Milwaukee, and I think I just called him and said, hey, I'm playing gongs and stuff, and I know that's what you do, and do you give lessons? And he was like, yeah, and we had this great conversation over the phone, and then I went to his house a few times up in Milwaukee, and he was and is instrumental in informing my playing and my approach to this work because he was a drummer, I'm a drummer, and uh I think maybe in some ways that folks that are percussionists sort of have an advantage of playing gongs and bowls and all these things because I grew up with drumsticks in my hand and I understand um, like how to tease sounds out of a piece of metal or a drum. As far as like with what sort of velocity am I hitting this instrument? Um, what sort of delicacy am I hitting this instrument with? Depending upon where I strike the instrument. If I hit it in the center, I'm going to get a certain kind of a sound. If I hit it towards the rim, I'm going to get a certain kind of sound. I can play the edges of this. That there's something about I think being a musician and learning things from a technique standpoint that a percussionist rather that translates really well to this world of gongs and bowls and bells and stuff. And so Michael's advice to me early on was just play from your heart. that sure, and I think from a technique standpoint, like there was not much that he could share with me, because I've been playing drums on and off since I was 9 years old. But he was very instrumental in me, for me conceptually, of saying, hey, you need to trust your instincts. You should
Mm.
play from your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Rely on all the years that you've played music, and just let that flow out of you naturally, as you're playing. And then also, Michael was a person who was saying, and read the room. Open up your ears and your mind, and project, like, how is this sounding 10 feet away? Because as the musician, you're on top of all these instruments, and there's an immediacy, and you're getting all the nuance and all the intensity. But if you were to project yourself 10 feet away, then 20 feet away, how is that sound carrying in the room? And what about the size and shape of the room? You have to take that into effect. You should clap your hands, or just walk around the room maybe with a bowl and get a sense of the acoustics, and then maybe set up base, put your, do your main setup based on intuitively where you think the best sound is going to be. And so Michael has just been, phenomenal for me in my growth. And then over the years, we played, we performed together and did some things. And Michael is just someone that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And he's uh you know has cheered me on and given me compliments over the years that have really just made me feel like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm learning, and I'm growing, and I'm moving forward. And other people that have been influential for me, as a gentleman who lives on the East Coast, Dadam Singh.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know Dadam, but he's another phenomenal gong player. Um, he was also very instrumental with me over the years, of being a source of encouragement and a source of knowledge. Um, I learned a tremendous amount from him. And then also a person here in Texas, his name is Gordon Kuhn, um, who played gongs and Tibetan bowls. But Gordon's thing was, he used to go to Nepal and choose bowls, and then and ship them here. And so it was through him that I learned about Tibetan bowls, and he studied with Mitch Nur. And Gordon is in his own right a bit of a expert in Tibetan bowls, because he just had been selling them for so many years, and has had so many bowls kind of travel through his hands. But sadly, Gordon started to get like early onset of dementia or Alzheimer's, and he's no longer selling bowls, or playing or anything like that. But he was also just a friend and a source of knowledge and inspiration. And so I feel lucky that I had these great people who were like immediately, uh, like allies,
Mm-hmm.
and friends and confidants. And I could, call Michael or call Dottam and say, well, I'm feeling frustrated with this or that, or there's something happening in the yoga world, and I'm not liking this or that. And that those guys were, continue to still always be there for me. And it's just nice to have like a sense of community,
Right. Right.
of people that you can talk shop with and
Mm-hmm.
share ideas and things. And Michael, after the first Gong Summit, I talked to him about a week later, and we were on the phone, I think, for about an hour and a half, and he was telling me like, "Oh my God, I just learned so much, and all
Mm-hmm.
these great people were here." and
Mm-hmm.
and so for Michael, who's been playing gongs for 30 years, to come back and go, "Oh my God, this was so informative, and I met
Yeah.
the greatest people, and I learned these new techniques," and I'm just like, "Whoa." Like, that must have really been incredible. So
Yeah. And just knowing that.
you were there, right? Is that
Yeah.
where you met Michael?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's where I met a lot of those folks, and I think that's what's so inspiring is it's limitless. There's always so much to learn, and I think what's really
exactly.
important about what you said, especially from a musician's perspective, is even if we've learned all this technique, you could be the best percussionist. Sometimes it's hard for people to kind of let go and play from the heart. Maybe you weren't
Yes.
taught that way because you were taught in a more disciplined, focused on technique way. So that is so important to be able to kind of let go and just be playful, just play. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It really is. And I have a quick story that when I lived in the Chicago area, a young man who played flute and all different kinds of flutes, and he actually, for a living, he played in the different stage productions for all the big shows that would come through Chicago, whether it was Oz or Cats or so he did that for a living, and he also taught people how to play flute. And the guy could sight read like crazy, just a unbelievably accomplished musician in a classical sense. Well, he came to a couple of my sessions and really enjoyed it, and he contacted me and said, "Hey, why don't we get together and do a recording?" And I said, "Fantastic." He had this kind of cool, portable recording set up and some great quality microphones and everything like that. So he and I got together a couple times, and because all I do is just like you said, I just kind of play, and I just play from the heart and just riff and let things go. Well, this guy, who was just a really wonderful person, he had the hardest time just letting go, and being able to just sort of play with me, because his whole world was very structured. That he was used to going to a gig, they would put a chart in front of him, and he could sight read and play the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
left to his own devices, just to let his heart sing and just play from a place of creativity and abandonment, he really, really struggled. And we never ended up finishing that project
Mm-hmm.
because he just felt like he wasn't like playing he couldn't execute what he wanted to, if because that what he was feeling in his heart wasn't coming out of his hands,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
you know
Sure.
and so it's just interesting, and it doesn't make one approach better than the other, but I think in the world of being a sound practitioner, part of what we do is we're reading in, people's energies, either individually if we're working with one person, or if we're working in big groups. So
Right. I'm curious. You've traveled all over the country, teaching workshops, thousands of workshops. How do you feel the state of sound therapy field is, and just how many gong meditations and sound baths are available now? What does this blossoming of sound opportunities, and what does it reveal at this time? That it's just such a huge thing.
geez, that's a great question. and and I've had conversations with all my fellow gong players, friends and mentors, and I think, on one level, I think it's great, that people are, wanting to share the beauty and the power of these instruments, whether it's Tibetan bowls, gongs, crystal singing bowls, chimes, you name it. My concern is that there are people that, they'll go online, they buy a gong,
Mm-hmm.
they watch a couple YouTube videos, and then they're out getting business cards made saying that they're gong masters,
Mm-hmm.
and playing for people. And these folks have no training, they have no technique, uh, they have not done kind of the, like, musicians call woodshedding, of
Mm-hmm.
just spending time with the instrument and learning what it can do, learning how you're relating to that particular instrument, how you're putting your energy and your persona, how to get the most out of the instrument from a dynamic standpoint, so that you can learn how to play at really intense volumes or play with incredible, whisper like delicacy. it's like those are the things that, and when I first bought a gong, and before I went to go play with people, and before I ever called Michael, it's like I I played my gong for 6 months or 9 months, and just like spent time with it, because I didn't want to go and play for people with not knowing what I was doing. And that was like part of my musician's training, that it's like, if like I would never want to go be in a band and not be rehearsed, because you would just go up on stage and sound like horse manure. That's not fun. It's fun when it sounds great, you know. And that attitude for me is that it's enjoyable and rewarding for me when I know that I'm playing, with quiet confidence, and knowing that if I'm playing to a group of 5 people or 500 people, I'm going to play from an authentic place within myself. I'm going to play with a certain level of mastery
Mm-hmm.
over the instruments that I'm blessed to play. But I think there are too many people now that it's just our society. Like, everybody wants to take a magic pill and have everything be better.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everybody's like, oh well, I'll watch a few YouTube videos, and now I'm a crystal bowl master, and so I'm going to go play for people. And so I've heard over the years that there's a lot of people that they'll say, "Oh, Kenny, I went to your gong meditation, and I went to Michael's, and it was really lovely. And then I saw person X, and it was awful. Like really, it was awful. It was either too loud, or the person was up there and they talked about themselves for half an hour even before they started to play. They did not have command over the instrument and stuff. And so I've had students over the years, and about a year ago, I started a new policy that, first of all, if I'm going to, like, mentor someone, I want to have a strong sense of kind of like who they are and what are their goals and things like that. And I make people pay for like 6 or 9 months of sessions,
Mm-hmm.
um, like right away, because I've had people take 2 lessons with me, and then before I know it, like,
Oh.
I'm in competition with them,
Oh,
and
jeez.
there's a big write up for them saying like, oh, I'm a gong master because I
Mm.
studied with Kenny twice. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't even consider myself a master, and I've been doing this full time for 13 years.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that like I said, I have a quiet confidence about what I do, but it's like, if I compare myself to, and it's never good to compare, but it's like, I look at the accomplishments, and Michael's playing style, and Dottam and his playing style, being a Kundalini practitioner. And there's a woman here in the Dallas area named Jody Roberts, who is a phenomenal gong player, and probably the best. I've seen her play Tibetan bowls, and it's the best I've ever experienced in my life. So it's like, if I I can't imagine ever, walking into the room and going, "Oh, I'm a master." It's like, who said it? I think, so many famous, jazz musicians have a quote basically of this nature, saying, "Well, the more that I've learned, the more that I realize that there's so much more to learn."
Sure. Yep.
you
Mm-hmm.
know and you made a statement to that effect earlier, but it's like, I think Peter Erskine said that, and I think, Charles Mingus had some kind of quote where he said, I've been playing the bass for like 14 years or something before I could get the instrument out of the way and really play.
Right.
you know and so I guess I have a little bit of resentment that there's people out there, just like, oh, I have a gong, and now I'm going to play for, hundreds of people, because I care about what I do, and I care about, people having, good and positive experiences. And so I just wish, and I'm an idealist, I'm a romantic and stuff like that, is that I just wish that people would take their time and learn, because these instruments are so beautiful and they're so powerful, and there's magic in this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that people, there's a reason that this is growing as a phenomenon and stuff. But I just wish people would take their time and learn, and uh because it's again, it's a vehicle for their growth too.
Right.
you know as the player. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope I don't sound like I'm a snotty weirdo or something.
Oh, not at
but
all. You know, that kind of
yeah,
learning and self growth can't be rushed, right? And
yes,
I just think
agreed.
that,
Yeah,
gosh, you can get one gong and learn for a lifetime rather than just keep getting more and more stuff. It's really easy to do, though. And
yeah,
no,
yep.
yeah, I definitely understand. And I think one thing I'm curious about, just considering the time we're in right now, of course, depending on when people listen to this, but is there any practice that you can offer for those at home, whether it's a sound or breathing practice you think could be helpful during this challenging and unprecedented time with the coronavirus? Is there something that you think,
Yeah,
something simple?
that's a great question. And it's like right now, just this past week and a half or so, that all the like my work has just completely dried up in the yoga world in
Yeah,
all aspects, and
yeah.
so everybody is figuring out different online platforms to be able to share this with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the first thing that popped into my mind was that if there are folks at home that are lucky enough to own a Tibetan bowl or a crystal bowl or some chimes or a frame drum or something, for me, I just find it so therapeutic that even if I pick up a frame drum and just play it gently for even 5 minutes, that just that simple act can get me out of my anxious mind, or it can soothe my, when I get upset or fearful, it's like I feel this energy like kind of right in my sternum, that I get all sort of like, shortness of breath and this kind of intensity, that I can pick up a Tibetan bowl and just play it and maybe make it, sing for a minute. That anxious, um, uncertain fight or flight kind of energy, at least for me, it just dissipates. And these times are so unprecedented and so uncertain that if there's anything that we can do at home to alleviate that anxiety, that sort of mental strain, I just say, please do it. Take the time, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour, whatever you can build into your day, to to um, use sound as a vehicle to for I mean, maybe this sounds weird, but it's almost like a self-soothing kind of a thing,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
and um, and then otherwise, I know that there's all kinds of very talented, people, playing gongs and bowls and stuff that are going to be offering things online, and you know, I think that maybe like just find somebody that you resonate with,
Mm-hmm.
as far as their playing style and stuff. And that's another thing that I like about this work too, is that everybody brings their history, whether they were musicians or not, um, to their playing. And that there's a guy in Michigan named Christopher Davis who's just a really great soul, a really lovely guy. I've had some wonderful conversations with him over the phone. That I've never heard him play, but I know in my heart that I would love to attend his events just
Mm-hmm.
because of the person he is, and that translates into what he delivers as a sound practitioner.
Yeah.
And so really, just find somebody that you resonate with, and if they're offering things, online, you should check that out. I know that there's a lot of great Tibetan bowl meditations and stuff on YouTube, and with these times of self isolation and all that stuff, I think there's even going to be more and more of it available. Good quality stuff available for people to enjoy and to incorporate into their meditative practice. Another thing that people have shared over the years is that it's important that if you do have a meditation practice, to try to have it at a regular scheduled time, and with kids being home from school and people working from home and probably for lots of folks that's not possible. But if at all, you can say like, well, you know what, my workday ends in the late afternoon, and I can set aside time at 4:45. I can meditate for 15 minutes. Like do that on a daily basis, and I think that helps with just having that routine and the practice of having uh, whatever form of meditation
Mm-hmm.
is that people do. So
And maybe, even during this time, maybe that's more important than ever, especially when
yes,
our routine has been completely changed and
yeah, just
shifted. That,
yeah,
yeah, and
yes,
I think it's really amazing the adjustments people are making. You are seeing a lot more online offerings and people
hmm
contributing Facebook Lives and all kinds of things. So, in a way, we do have a bit of a gift of time right now for how to focus and how to be
yes,
present and how to, use sound to perhaps mute some of our fears and really tune more within, go more within during this time.
yes, yeah. I've been doing some fun Facebook Live things that I call the daily dose of drumming,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
and specifically for because it's like my whole thought about it was behind it was that man, there's so many families that it's like all of a sudden mom and dad are now homeschooling their kids
Mm-hmm.
and that so my invitation is like hey, I'm just going to drum for 15 minutes, and everybody drop what you're doing and grab your car keys and shake those, or dance around the living room and grab some pots and pans, and let's just make some noise and have fun, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and break up the day and have a little bit of a different focus. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, yeah, so I think it's important to have fun.
Absolutely. And to tune into our creativity. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, 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 yes.
Well, awesome. This has been a lot of fun in itself. And where can people follow what you're doing? You have a website and all the other stuff.
Yeah, my website is gongmeditation.com, but I'm going to warn everybody, I haven't touched my website in years, and I'm actually going to use downtime to update that, and I'm going to change hosts and everything like that. So stay tuned for that. Also, I'm very active on Facebook. Kenny Kolter, the last name is Kolter, um, and on Instagram it's Earth Gong. And so I have a beautiful 4-year-old grandson, and so I post pictures of him. I post pictures of just what's happening in my life. I like Blackhawks hockey, and I like to cook for my wife, and I also post my events there and stuff. And a long time ago, a person that I knew that was in social media said, people like to do business with people that they know and like. And
Mm-hmm.
so why not just put who you are out there on social media and not have it be so calculated?
Mm-hmm.
Just put, hey, this is who you are,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's what I do. So I post things on Instagram about where my events are and what I'm up to, sort of as far as being a sound practitioner. But then you'll also see a fun uh, picture of my grandson and whatever else I got going on in my life, a
Mm-hmm.
walk that my wife and I are taking or something.
Sure.
so,
Sure.
uh, so yeah, that's how people can reach out to me. Thanks for asking.
Great. Well, excellent. This
Oh, and
is,
then also,
yeah.
can I do a little like shameless self
Oh,
promotion?
please. Yeah.
I also sell Tibetan bowls, and
Mm-hmm.
so if anybody's interested, I've sold like probably close to 100 bowls through the years over the phone during this time of self isolation, and so I have a wonderful selection of fata body, Ramuna and Manipuri style bowls,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happy to ship and all that stuff. So send me a note on Facebook, um, and I'd be happy to work with anybody who's interested in getting a high quality singing bowl.
Thanks. It's been really fun talking to you, and I appreciate everything that you shared. And the stories just make it so much more personal. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, I feel like I want to interview you and learn all about you now.
Let's do it. uh, yeah.
Yeah, someone's got to interview the interviewer at some point,
I have
right?
thought of that. Yeah, I've thought of that. Just got to find
Yeah.
the right
Yeah, because
person to.
people want to get to know what you're all about,
Yeah. Yeah. Find somebody to switch roles with.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Sure, sure, sure. Well, I'd be happy to do that if you ever want to do that.
that would be cool.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, let's consider that. And yeah,
Okay.
like I said, in the messages, usually I just do one podcast a month, but with this extra time and being able to kind of grab people, even somebody like Mitch Noor, and
Yeah.
who's usually so busy, and of course still is, but I can kind of get more and more of these released while people have the time to listen and contribute. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's
And
great.
I think it's great that you're you know uh, you know interviewing people and opening up this world.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Oh,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
doing that.
Thank you. It's a great learning experience for me and a great way to connect with people
Mhm.
and just have an offering. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, hey, it was a pleasure visiting with you.
Yeah, you
Thank you
too.
again for inviting me to be on here, and it's just been a pleasure.
It really has. Thank you so much, and take care.
Okay, you too. All right.
Okay. Yep. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sound Heal Podcast, sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com. Check things out on Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio, and you can listen to all previous podcasts as well as music meditations on the YouTube channel at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well and stay tuned.